everybody. I hope you still have some attention span left after a long day. But great to be here, great to be back at the event. Thank you to Tony for inviting us, and also to his team that organized this great event. It's not trivial, it's a lot of work, and they've done a great job, so thank you, Tony. You know, a lot of great discussion around digital transformation, network transformation, the evolution of the service provider world, the transition from telcos to DSPs and so on. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to talk about our role, MEF's role in the area of network transformation, because that's what we're really all about. I'm going to cover off three pieces here today. Very quickly, who we are and what we're delivering. And then there are a lot of different aspects of our work that I can touch on that I think would be relevant here today. But I'm going to pick three global trends which I think have relevance to all the providers here and others. So I'm going to pick the three trends that I'm just going to highlight to you that we think are important. And then I'm going to kind of wrap up by just summarizing, how we can add value as an industry partner to the service provider community as you make that journey, as I say, from being a traditional CSP to a DSP in this ever-changing world of ours. So that's what I want to cover. In terms of who we are, we're an industry association, nonprofit. We were founded in 2001. We were going to have a big 20th anniversary party this year, but it didn't really work out. We had a great one when we turned 10 years old, but maybe we'll do like everybody else, Expo 20, and we do 21, and we'll do 2022 for our anniversary or something. We have about 200 member companies. We are talking about 2/3 are service providers from all parts of the world, network technology vendors, a very increasing mix of technology suppliers as our work has changed. And we're also now seeing the cloud providers come into MEF as well, so we have a very interesting ecosystem. And our role is really to drive network transformation, within the context of digital transformation, or the larger goal of digital transformation. And we do it by providing a framework for service providers to build, scale, and monetize services. We've always been all about services that you're selling to retail, services that are wholesale oriented. That's what we've been doing for 20 years, except that we're just doing that on a much bigger scale now than we were 10, 15 years ago. And there's a huge emphasis in our work around automation, as you'll see. It's one of the topics, and there's a very big emphasis on globalization, of bringing ecosystems together, and automation between providers on a global basis. So to get going, I want to start by just highlighting our leadership. We're very proud of our board of directors. They provide tremendous guidance. If you just look at the slide here, you'll recognize a lot of the names from different parts of the world. US, EMEA, APAC. Of course, we had PCCW Global here with Mark Halfinger. His key executives are on our board. They've been a great supporter of ours, and it was great to see him earlier mentioning MEF. But the point I make here is that these are very senior global networking leaders, and they are on our board because they understand the value that we bring, the importance of our work to their business. And they're busy people, and they give us our time, and we appreciate that. And I'm very, very privileged to be able to work with an elite group of operators like this. In terms of how we organize our work and what we do, we have something called the MEF 3.0 Global Services Framework. You saw PCCW Global earlier on one of their slides representing that they were MEF 3.0 certified for some of their services and APIs. Up on the left there, you have services categories. So these are the standards that we build for services that providers use, wholesale and retail-oriented standards. At the bottom there, you'll see underlay standards. We're historically known for having developed Metro Ethernet 20 years ago, then Carrier Ethernet. It evolved to Carrier Ethernet, and which are now more increasingly referred to as an underlay service between data centers and all sorts of applications. We've expanded that underlay type work to IP and optical. We became the first organization, and really the only organization, to now be developing SD-WAN standards. And we started with one standard 4 years ago, and that has spun off 24 different projects in SD-WAN, SD-WAN management, and it takes us into SASE and security, which is a sort of third layer there. And as we look forward, we're now very closely looking at the edge, and we're doing things like network slicing. We're looking at the interface from the edge to enterprise and automation of commerce at that level, and so on and so forth. So we have an expanded pool of services that we've standardized, and below that we have a framework for how these services are automated, including APIs at different points. And above and beyond that, we provide certification programs for people, for vendors, and service providers. The first trend I want to talk about today is inter-provider business functions. These are automating. And we heard earlier a discussion around enterprises. Enterprises are looking for services on demand. They want to automate, and they want that, console connect with PCCW. Again, I use them as an example. Is a great example of that type of automation. The discussion today was we're focused on the cloud, but they're requiring on-demand services. You can't deliver those with automation. And what we're seeing is the tier one and others, the biggest buyers of services in the world, are implementing APIs with their wholesale providers, because a typical tier one provider that's maybe delivering layer 2 services has 200 to 300 global partners. And what started to happen was, as they started implementing APIs with some of the highest transaction players, they were proprietary, and it makes no sense to have all of these different proprietary APIs out there. So MEF built that. We built a set of standards for APIs that are now getting very, very significant traction in the industry. And I'll tell you about a survey in a second. The other thing that's driving inter-carrier automation is SD-WAN, because if you're implementing a global SD-WAN, you've got to be able to acquire internet access services from your partners, and there's a great degree of automation for that. And this is just a very simple example, the simplest of example of how we would implement automation between two carriers. On the left, a retail service provider that is servicing a customer in a particular country. They need an endpoint, a last mile in another country. They have to work with the wholesale provider, and you automate those transactions increasingly with what we call LSO Sonata, Lifecycle Service Orchestration APIs, for business functions like quoting and ordering and trouble ticketing and so on. The simplest examples, but that is the most common use case right now. Now that changes as we go forward, as the ecosystems are delivering a more complex set of services to retail customers around the world, involving security and other things. We did a survey of my principal analyst did a survey of about 30 some odd companies that concluded a couple months ago, an initial phase 1 survey about the benefits of this automation with these APIs. Improved customer experience and loyalty was number one. We had a lot of benefits, 7 or 8 of them listed. The second one was service delivery, time to service delivery and time to revenue, which of course are tied together. And interestingly enough, of the 32 companies or whatever we surveyed at the time, about 24 of those are going to be in production with these APIs in the next 6 months. About half of them already are. The point is that as we expand our survey to talk to more companies, the number of companies that are planning, the percentage of companies planning to implement standardized APIs for inter-carrier automation is growing quickly. So we're at that inflection point because we have big tier 1 buyers that are doing the development now, that are putting it in production, and that is the motivation, that will be the business case for tier 2, tier 3, et cetera, wholesale sellers of services to automate. When the buyers are saying, I'm using this standard and I want to automate, that's our direction. Also, a lot of discussion about SD-WAN, what happened with that market during the pandemic, did it slow down? The net, it's at different places in different countries, but it is growing. And it's an industry that started, it was a vendor-driven industry. There were no standards. It was they call it the Wild West. It was somewhat chaotic. And about 4 years ago, as I mentioned, we started to introduce standards into this area. And we're getting very, very good reception. There's a lot of education we have to do. The good news is if you're a service provider that is still at an early stage in your SD-WAN portfolios, then you can take advantage of a huge amount of standards work so you don't have to reinvent the wheel and just purely take what the vendors are giving you to build your offering. You can take a look at what we've done and use it as your guidance and roadmap to build out and automate your SD-WAN offerings. And we have projects going on that are edge-oriented with vendor interoperability, for example, that are driven by the hyperscalers in MEF. The third, I'm by no means a security expert, but from a trending perspective, every service provider we talk to, and of course enterprise, is going to be talking about security these days. And again, similar to SD-WAN, the standards are very immature, and in fact, in many ways, there aren't any. And so we've started to do standards work in the area of SASE, a SASE services framework that providers can use to build out their services, where we also try to get the leading the security vendors on board, to implement or to follow our guidance there. Doing the same thing with zero trust. But one of the big challenges we have, and what we're focusing on right now, is our board, our leading service providers are saying, we don't have all the right players coming together. The service providers and the vendors are not all working together, like has happened with some of the other areas of standards in the industry. They're not coming together yet. And that's a big objective of ours, is to bring that community together. Because the service providers are saying, I don't want to be locked into a specific security vendor solution. I want to have some flexibility. I want to see some standards out there, which is going to make it easier to sell the services in the first place. So we think that, again, similar to SD-WAN, if you're building out your service offering in the security area, SASE and so on, you'll be able to, as much as the standards are somewhat immature right now, they're early stage, you'll be able to leverage those. So to conclude then, I think, Tony aptly represented us here as an industry partner. I think about half of the companies listed as sponsors here are already participating in MEF, and if you're not, we'd love to have you. But, we've been very good at bringing the right players to achieve certain objectives together. That's what we've been doing for a long time. That's our business model. And so that's what we've done, and we continue to do that, bring the players together to continue to build out, modern, forward-looking services that are revenue-generating for service providers, and can be delivered and automated on a global basis. And ultimately, we want to be the partner. We want to continue to be the partner for the service providers to enable your network transformation journey. So with that, I thank you, and thanks again, Tony, for having us here. And and Tony, by the way, has been a partner of ours for many years to Telecom Review. He comes to our own events, and so we'll see you then. Thank you.